2.
Welcome into Leather Brains. Your host, Slapdog here, and I am joined today by Scotty Del Rey. Scotty, it is Wednesday, the 20th. Week 2 is now officially, finally, and fully in the books. Yet he is not here with us like he usually is for Wednesday's episode because he's on vacation. So I did not approve that. I know. I didn't approve it. I don't think you approved it.
No.
I don't know if...
he thinks he can just do whatever he wants.
It's ridiculous. It's absolutely absurd. But I appreciate you coming in and filling in on the Wednesday's episode because typically you're in for Monday. But we just had some breaking news that I think needs to be discussed right this moment before we get into this episode. And that news is Cam Akers. Cam Akers, right before we clicked go live, was traded to the Vikings for a 2026 pick. Now they swapped picks. We don't know what those picks are at this very moment. We might know by the end of this podcast, and if we do, we will certainly let everybody know, but this news is just broken. We don't know the pick swaps yet, but Cam Akers is now going to be wearing a Vikings jersey. Scotty, what was your initial reaction when you heard this?
Bad for fantasy, good for Cam Akers in real life. So happy for him. Hopefully he'll get more consistent playing time. And honestly, I think Alexander Madison's going to benefit in real life from it as well, just because he's never had that bell cow role. He obviously over the first 2 weeks was not very efficient in that bell cow role. So being able to have that sort of change of pace and get him in and out, I think is going to benefit both of them. But for fantasy, gross.
Yeah, and I mean, that's what we're here for, right? This is what everybody is tuning in for the most part, other than because they love to look at our beautiful faces. What do you do with, I mean, like, I own Alexander Madison in a league, and I own Cam Akers in the same league. I drafted them in back-to-back rounds because I needed some running back help, and now it seems like you can't trust either of them. I mean, Alexander Madison is somebody who has seen a lot of volume, and that's what's made him usable these last couple of weeks, or I won't even say usable, but somebody that you want to start and put in a starting position for fantasy football. But now the volume play is not even there. So you just set both these guys on your back. I mean, I have to start one of them. I'm probably going to start Alexander Madison this week just because this trade happened so soon. I don't know if you agree with that, but if you have to start one of them, I would say Madison probably to begin with is still the guy, question mark?
Yeah, I mean, definitely, but you got to start looking at options. You got to start thinking about making trades and look at some of these waiver wire guys, which we talked about on Monday's episode, but you really got to try and make something happen there. Cause I think both of these guys are going to be pretty much useless for fantasy if you're in a standard league.
Yeah, and I tend to agree with you. That's very unfortunate. I mean, it's good that Cam found a new home, I suppose. Not the home that most people were probably hoping for, but not surprised. I mean, Alexander Madison has not looked great. So the rest of this episode is going to entail for everybody who is tuned in. We're going to be going over the end of week 2, so we're going to be talking about that. Some injuries that happened, of course, as well as injuries to look out for this upcoming week. And then we have there's a fun little segment. It's called Hear Me Out. You're going to bring some people. I'm going to bring some people. We want people to listen to us because we are intelligent, we are wise, we are handsome, and they need to hear what we have to say. And if you're watching, see what we have to say. Go follow us on YouTube live because at the very end of this episode, we are going to answer your questions. So if you are not already, go over to YouTube, go to Leather Brains Fantasy Football, go check us out and submit your questions in the comments. And we will actually pull up your questions at the end of the show and we will answer them live. So without further ado, Scotty, let's get into it. First off here, we have the New Orleans Saints versus Carolina. The Saints win this one 20-17. I'm going to ask you this question. Have you ever heard of a man named Tony Jones, Scotty?
Well, no, I can't even think of a witty response because no, I've never heard of him.
I hadn't either. I don't think anybody's heard of him, but turns out he is a running back. I wouldn't have guessed that, but he's a running back for the Saints, and the Saints running back room is absolutely depleted. So a gentleman by the name of Tony Jones came in and was the lead back in this game after Jamal Williams went out with an injury. Kendre Miller, their rookie running back, was also out for this game. And then you have Alvin Kamara, who is currently suspended. So what do you do? You know, what's going to happen with him? I mean, you have to wait for him. This running back room is in shambles. Kenry Miller, I think, is going to come back this week. I say all this because I think he is potentially a play for you because they have no other running back depth. So I want to say that. And then the other thing, this game was pretty gross for me, but Miles Sanders, is he a desperation play only for you, Scotty? Because he's playing for the Panthers. Panthers aren't very good. Miles Sanders went 14 for 43 and 0, caught 3 out of 5 through the air. Is he desperation?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't really say desperation play, just given the state of the running back position right now. I think given the fact the role that he has in this offense makes him at least there's upside there. But you're right. I mean, it's not a good team. They're not going to get in the red zone very often. He's not a high quality play by any means. But, like you mentioned, a lot of people are in the Cam Akers situation or the Alexander Madison situation, or they may have lost Nick Chubb, and you might not have any other options, in which case Miles Sanders may be your best bet.
Yeah, unfortunately. Other unfortunate things here. We're going to move over to the Steelers-Cleveland game. I want to bring this up because, of course, the narrative here is the Steelers did win this game 26-22, but the unfortunate news is Nick Chubb. Everybody knows what happened with Nick Chubb at this point. If you don't, you're not paying attention to not fantasy football, but NFL in general. Nick Chubb broke his leg. I don't know if it's exactly a break, but if you saw the pictures, his leg is at a 90-degree angle, and your leg's not supposed to do that in the opposite direction. And it was. I'd honestly be surprised if he ever played in the NFL again, to be honest with you, which is very sad to say.
Yeah, I mean, you got to keep your fingers crossed. There are, a lot of players have come back, including Nick Chubb himself, from injuries that are brutal like this. So you just got to hope. But, Nick Chubb has made a name for himself by being a bruiser and being someone that's hard to bring down. If he doesn't have 100% in his knee, it's going to be real tough for him to come back and be the same player. But obviously, crossing our fingers for him. It is devastating, obviously, for him, but also on a much lesser important note, to fantasy managers. Everyone who drafted Nick Chubb is royally screwed.
Yeah, no, I think that is a very accurate statement. And Jerome Ford, I think, is the name that a lot of people have been looking at recently. There was a lot of Twitter talk on our profile today about him. We were talking about his fab. How much money did people spend on this guy? Jerome Ford, he filled the role well for the Browns without Nick Chubb. He went 24 points on 16 touches. He was usable in the passing game. He didn't look terrible, really. But the question being is, what do you spend for him? What would you have felt comfortable spending for him? Because obviously now the narrative, of course, is Kareem Hunt, right? Mm-hmm. The hometown hero. I don't want to say that. I don't know if we should say that, but he's been with the Browns. He became a free agent this year. We've talked a lot about, there's some of these older free agents just sitting out there waiting, and he comes back home because of this very unfortunate injury. So we saw a lot of people spending a lot of money on Jerome Ford. I mean, we're talking about all of their fab. We put out some feelers. Everyone was saying, I dropped $100 out of $100 of fab on this guy. I've seen people they've traded to get more fab so they could buy this guy. And then on the same, the following couple hours later, we find out about the Kareem Hunt news. What do you think this does for this running back room?
Yeah, I mean, we had sort of an in-house discussion about this. I'm not someone who was ever going to spend 100% of my fab on this guy solely because, he did look good in this game, but they're playing Pittsburgh. And Cleveland as a whole just doesn't look like a very good offense. We were all hoping for a big step forward with Deshaun Watson. We were hoping for, Amari Cooper and Elijah Moore to really step up and to have, a lot of explosiveness. And we're just not seeing that yet. So the scoring opportunities just haven't been there. And Nick Chubb is able to overcome that because he's Nick Chubb. But guess what? Nobody else in this running back room is Nick Chubb. So I was never real excited about it, but I understand, especially with, like we said, the state of the running back situation and losing Nick Chubb, Jerome Ford seems to be, a viable backup that you could put in. But with Kareem Hunt there, it's going to muddy this a little bit. I kind of fall under the same umbrella that a couple of other of the Leather Brain guys, stated that I think it's Ford's backfield to lose. But still, I'm not overly excited about it. I mean, if you spent all your fab on Ford, I think he's going to be playable. But I don't think he's going to, save your league or anything if you lost Nick Chubb.
You mentioned playable. This Browns offense has not looked great thus far, and it's only 2 weeks in. So I don't want to hit the panic button yet. We've had some conversations about our hands hovering over some things. maybe is this a team that your hand is kind of hovering over that panic button with? Because Amari Cooper, he was not supposed to play in this game. I did not think he was going to play in this game. And then at the very last second, we all found out that Amari Cooper was going to play in this game. So it really pissed off a lot of fantasy football managers because with it being a Monday night game, you don't have a lot of options. They were kind of saying he wasn't going to play. So they took him out. They benched him for another player. And then all of a sudden, oh, shit, Amari Cooper's going to play. And now he's sitting on people's benches, mine included. Cooper, he had a 24.6% target share through 2 weeks, and Elijah Moore has a 23.2% target share through 2 weeks. So these guys are actually really comparable as far as what they're getting in a target share. Amari Cooper is the wide receiver one for them, but when you're seeing that close of a margin of a target share between these two guys, my question to you, Scott, is do you feel comfortable flexing Elijah Moore in your leagues?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's going to be matchup dependent given the way that this offense is performing so far. But yeah, I mean, his usage in the offense is good. I'm happy with that. Obviously, we know he's a talented receiver. I think he could be more talented than people expect if the offense takes a step forward. But the biggest concern for me is Deshaun Watson. We just haven't seen him. Everyone said, okay, last year doesn't really count. He's got all this rust, whatever. And he's come out over 2 weeks. He is the 15th ranked quarterback. He's got a 55.1 completion percentage. People like Baker Mayfield, Sam Howell, Jared Goff, Jordan Love, Daniel Jones, they're all, as far as a fantasy perspective, better than Deshaun Watson right now. They're throwing fewer interceptions. They've got a better completion percentage. They've got more points per game. They've taken fewer sacks. That's troublesome. So, you hope that this offense continues to move forward, but until that happens, I'm going to be real wary of everyone on this offense. And that was only excluding Nick Chubb before, and now it includes everybody.
So we talked about Deshaun Watson just a moment ago. He's QB 15 on the year so far with a 55.1% completion rate. So you have other quarterbacks out there some of these guys are sitting on your waiver wire, right? Baker Mayfield, Sam Howell, Jared Goff, Jordan Love, and Daniel Jones. And I do want to point out Jordan Love is the quarterback 2 on the season. So these are all further on the list as far as points per game, better completion percentage, and fewer sacks taken. Do you hit the panic button on Deshaun Watson?
In most leagues, in most one quarterback leagues, I don't see a reason to start him until he proves otherwise. I mean, you've got other options that you can plug in that have potentially higher upside depending on matchups. So, if you drafted Deshaun Watson in a single quarterback league, I think I might take more of a streaming approach and just start looking at matchups and seeing, okay, which games are most likely to be a shootout? Who's going to have the highest upside on a week by week basis? And don't be afraid to mix and match and swap out on a weekly basis. Until Deshaun Watson starts showing that he can be some semblance of his old self, I am a little bit afraid of him.
I own him in a couple leagues, and I'm starting to have those conversations with myself about looking in other areas for a different quarterback. I'm looking for Jordan Love. He's still on the waiver wire for a lot of people, and I'm like, man, it's not flashy, it's not beautiful, it's not great, but he's there. He is quarterback 2 on the season, and that's hard to argue with when he's just sitting on the waiver wire and you have somebody like Deshaun Watson who is not getting me these points. So I think it's fair. I'm not saying drop Deshaun Watson just yet. I still want to see if there's any juice left to squeeze for him, but I am pretty sad that I haven't got the usage that I was expecting. So that's some cleanup on week 2, Scotty. Let's try and set our eyes toward the future here. And let's go towards some week 3 preview and have some conversations. So, of course, injuries. The sirens are coming out. For anybody driving, I apologize for the sounder because there is not an ambulance behind you. There's just injuries in that fantasy football landscape. Let's talk about it. First off here, Saquon Barkley is out for Thursday night's game. The game tomorrow or today if you're listening on our podcast. Not surprised. Not surprised at all. I mean, for anybody that saw that injury, it did not look wonderful. He was spinning around. He hurt himself, and he was pretty upset about it. So I expect Saquon Barkley to be out for not only this game, but I don't know why the Giants try and risk it. It's still early in the season. Don't put your stud out there to get hurt because it's just going to cause you headache and confusion at the end of the year, and there's enough confusion for the Giants team already. So Saquon Barkley is out. Would you play Matt Breida? Would you feel comfortable playing Matt Breida in his absence?
If you have to. They're playing the 49ers, and that's going to be a tough matchup. In all likelihood, the Giants are going to be down big, and they're going to have to throw the ball to stay competitive. The the stats are a little bit misleading, I think, with San Francisco. So far in the year, they're kind of middle of the pack in terms of run defense. But again, their offense is just so efficient that it's difficult to run the ball on them consistently because usually you find a script where you have to throw it. And I just am not overly confident in Breida. And I'm also not confident that he's going to get the lion's share of the workload. I mean, he probably will get a majority, but I don't think it's going to be, I think it's going to be a committee of backups there. So if you have to, but I'm not, jumping out of my shoes to get him off the waiver.
What about Joshua Kelly? Obviously, he's probably not sitting on the waiver, but Austin Eckler did not practice today. I think it's something to watch, but would you feel comfortable starting Joshua Kelly this week if Eckler was absent?
Who do the Chargers have this week?
I
think it's a shootout this
week. I asked that hoping that you knew. They play the Vikings this week.
Yeah, so you're looking at another shootout situation. I don't expect a lot of production coming from the running back position. I think it's going to be a lot of receiver action. So again, if you have to, a lot of people are in a tough spot where you just have to find someone who's going to get touches for your running back 2 or your flex position. And so if you have to, but again, I'm not excited about it.
Dang, you're not really excited about anything that we're talking about.
I know, I'm a wet blanket today.
God dang. All right, Jamal Williams did not practice, running back for the Saints. Of course he didn't practice. He is hurt. And Derrick Henry also did not practice. So just wanted to note that. Watch Derrick Henry. I hope it's just because he's old and he's got those brittle old bones and he needs a little bit more time to recover. So
I think if you're in that on that team, you want Derrick Henry to be at 100. He probably never has to practice again. Just show up on Sundays and perform. You don't want any you don't want any chance of him getting hurt or dinged up in practice. Just be ready for Sunday.
Yeah. That's it for the injuries that we have thus far. Let's move over to our new segment. Hear me out. You listening, Scotty? Are you listening to that bear?
Yeah.
Because you're the bear.
That was terrifying.
Yeah, I know. We still got to work on the droppers. So for anybody who's watching, we'll work on it. Promise. Scotty, why don't you take us away here with some hear me out conversation?
Yeah, so the idea behind this segment is it's sort of like starts and sits, but on steroids. We want to take players who a lot of people, given the matchup or whatever situation, might be a little bit down on, but maybe we're more optimistic, or the other way around. Maybe somebody's optimistic on a guy and you think, I don't think this week's going to be it. So kicking things off here, I want to start with Hunter Henry versus the Jets. Now, Hunter Henry, obviously, ladies and gentlemen, this is your number 2 tight end on the year. So he's killing it so far, but we know Hunter Henry. We know he's not Travis Kelce. We know he's not Mark Andrews. You don't expect him to come out and win you your fantasy league each and every week. But here's the fact of the matter is the Jets have a great defense. They have a lockdown secondary. They have a good defensive front. Mac Jones has one option, and it's Hunter Henry. He's going to be checking down to Hunter Henry left and right. And by the way, this has been proven over the first 2 weeks. The Jets give up the 7th most points in the league to tight ends. Last week when they played Dallas, there were 2 people who caught receiving touchdowns. Both of them were tight ends. So I think this is going to be a defensive showcase. I think it's going to be a low-scoring affair. I think there's probably one person in this game that you want to start, and it's Hunter Henry. It's supposed to be controversial. So take this with a grain of salt, too.
No, here's my argument. And I made the same argument that on the last episode. Zach Ertz. He's tight end 9 on the season. He is sitting on your waiver wire. He's 38% owned. He is seeing a tremendous target. He's seeing a target share that you pray you get out of a wide receiver. And he's sitting there doing nothing. I don't understand this. I went and looked on our waiver wire. The only argument I can see for Zach Ertz is this. The Cardinals are trash. And we are. I'm a Cardinals fan. We're horrible. We're absolutely terrible. But we're going to be playing down a lot. And the other argument you can make is that he's old. That's fine. But he is a veteran. He is there. Last week he got a 30%. I think I ran the numbers on last episode. It's like a 31% target share off 2 weeks. He's seen 10 targets in game 1 and 10 or 8 targets in week 2. See, I'm so excited. I'm getting ahead of myself. I really like Zach Ertz a lot. And as a value play. Now, if you have like Mark Andrews or Kelce or somebody, of course, you're going to play those guys. But he's sitting there. The only reason Hunter Henry, in my mind, is tight end 2 on the years because he's gotten lucky. You can't predict touchdowns. So
yeah, but that's the thing is that the Patriots are about 100 times more likely to score touchdowns than the Cardinals, and especially that's the case especially this week with the Cardinals playing Dallas. So in particular, I don't hate the idea of picking up Zach Ertz. Just generally speaking, if you're looking for a tight end, obviously the target share is there. There are worse options, but this week, no way in hell.
You think he outscores him this week?
Yeah.
You want to do a little LB bet here that I think
bro.
Zach Ertz
Lay it on me.
Okay. A sincere compliment for whoever wins on next episode, on Monday's episode. If Zach Ertz finishes higher than Hunter Henry, then you have to give me a very sincere compliment. And if you win with Hunter Henry, you got to give me a sincere compliment. How's that sound?
Yeah. What if both of them score like 3 points? I think there should be a threshold where
doesn't matter.
Suck.
No.
Okay.
We're talking about fantasy football finishes in a PPR format.
PPR. Okay.
Okay.
I think we should go half PPR. It's the most fair.
Nope. No, that's not the most fair. Everybody plays PPR.
No, that's not true. First of all, half PPR is in between standard and PPR. It is the middle ground.
I think you're afraid. Because you know that Zach Ertz is going to finish higher.
I think playing PPR gives you a significantly higher chance than half PPR because he's going to get peppered with targets, but he's not ever going to get meaningful touches. So that's why I think half PPR is fair.
So if you play in a full PPR format, you're saying Zach Ertz is the way to go?
No, I still think Hunter Henry will get.
Okay. Well, then we'll do full PPR.
You are.
I'm
angling
juggling
this. Yeah, you are specifically changing or messing with the bet to give yourself a better chance.
No,
but I do still think you'll lose, so I'm in. Let's do it.
Okay, all right, that's fine. Okay, hear me out, Scotty. Are you ready?
Okay, I'm ready.
You start Kyren Williams this week. Are you shocked?
No,
because it's an absolute no-brainer. Of course, you start Kyren Williams this week, but I just wanted to bring some statistics to the conversation for anybody who might actually have some, two decent running backs, and Kyren Williams they picked up off of the waivers. You start Kyren Williams, absolutely no questions asked. He is a sure lock. He takes one of your RB spots. The Bengals actually have one of the worst defenses when it comes to allowing rushing yards. And in fact, they're 31 out of 32 in the NFL for rushing yards, allowing rushing yards. They've allowed 192 rushing yards per game. Cam Akers, his career is now done with the Rams, and Kyren is the back to own. Last week, he played for 95% of snaps, saw 14 touches. I wrote all of this before Cam Akers was traded, so there's not even any sort of competition. So that's my hear me out. That's an easy one. That was a give me. I just wanted to point that out because Cam Akers, when I gathered all this information right before we clicked go live, Cam Akers was still there. So that was
well. Let's parlay this into a different conversation because I think this is an interesting one. Obviously, Kyren Williams is another waiver wire darling. I was reading a couple articles because I'm always reading about fantasy all the time, as many of the brainiacs probably are as well. Yeah. I think there might be a pretty strong argument for selling Kyren Williams high. And there are a couple reasons for this. Obviously, he's overperformed expectations. Obviously, now he is the sole back in this backfield that we know of. But number one, he's an undersized back with a significant injury history. Number two, we now have 2 consecutive years of Sean McVay being completely unpredictable when it comes to this. I mean, there are still other running backs on this roster, nobody you've ever heard of. I think it's Ronnie Rivers and Zach Evans. Is it more likely that Kyren Williams gets a consistent bell cow role as an undersized back with injury history, or is it more likely that there's some sort of a committee here in an offense that likes to throw the ball a lot?
I think I don't hate the idea of selling him. I really don't. But the question is what are you looking to target? Now, if you could move him for James Cook, I would do that. And I think there's probably a real life situation where you could. Would you do that?
Yeah. And I think ultimately the argument comes down to you got him pretty much for free, maybe some fab. but you didn't draft him, right? He didn't take a draft spot. You got him pretty much for free, and his value I don't think is going to be any higher, even if he is, continues down the path he's on. I don't think it's going to be any higher than it is right now. So I think if you're comfortable at RB, which many people who own Kyron Williams are, they just picked them up because of the waiver opportunity. Well, you might be able to secure a bag here and maybe lock down another position or get some more value for him for a guy that is unproven. We've seen him work through 2 weeks and he's been good, but it's only 2 weeks. We don't really know what the whole season has to offer. And again, I want to stress the injury concerns with his size and his history. So I think there's a strong argument for it.
Like I said, I don't hate it. My only concern is, as we've kind of stood on this pillar at Leather Brains, that Sean McVay typically uses one running back for everything. So
I think since we said that, we've been wrong.
No, I mean,
it's true historically.
That's fair.
But since we said that, we've been wrong.
Yeah, no, and that's fair, and I get that. It just, for me, a small part of me is just still holding that, and so I own Kyron Williams in a couple leagues. I need a running back because I made poor life choices, and it is going to be really hard to let go of him. So, but if I can move him for somebody who I think is going to be a mainstay in an offense, I would be willing to do that. But I wouldn't be willing to trade him for pennies on the dollar. Nor do I think you're going to have to,
right,
because he's good.
Yeah.
Before we go, I do want to hear your next Hear Me Out. I just want to give a quick shout out for anybody that there's questions are flooding in over on YouTube. Greatly appreciate them. If you're watching us over on YouTube and you've submitted a question, we will answer them. It'll just be at the end of the show. So I appreciate it. And Scotty, take us to your next Hear Me Out.
Yeah, the injury bug really damped down this next Hear Me Out. But I'm still going to give it anyway because I think it's a fun conversation. Start Isaiah Pacheco versus the Bears. And this really goes for any running back you have versus the Bears, because it seems like they may be a terrible run defense and an offense that can't move the ball, which means the game script is probably also going to be in your favor. Now, the caveat here, of course, Pacheco did not practice today because of a hamstring issue, which is very concerning. A running back that runs like Pacheco does with a hamstring issue, okay, I may not start him. Keep an eye on that. But if it comes out, tomorrow or Friday that, hey, this was no big deal, just cautionary, whatever, he's still going to be good to go, I would consider playing Pacheco. And that's in spite of the fact that playing pretty much anyone on the Chiefs, as we've discussed at length, is a risk because you don't know who's going to get the touchdowns. You don't know who's going to get the meaningful touches. But I really do think a running back against the Bears is going to be good. The Bears have, looks like, the 28th worst run defense in the league. And when it comes to the Chiefs in particular, this game is going to go to one of two ways. The Chiefs are either going to figure out how to move the ball again, and they're going to look like the Chiefs from last season, in which case they're going to blow the Bears out of the water, and you got a lot of garbage time touches for whoever the running back is. Or B, the Chiefs are going to struggle again because their receivers are subpar. They're working with a bunch of wide receiver threes, and they're going to have to rely on the running back to move the ball against a bad run defense. So either way, if Pacheco's healthy, I'm happy starting him in the flex.
No concerns about McKinnon?
No, because the game script I don't think is going to favor McKinnon either way either.
Okay. It's just hard. Like, I've been on this. I own, in our Dynasty League, I own Pacheco for, I got him very late and I didn't really ever use him. And then I traded him away because the hard thing for me is just starting a running back for the Chiefs because that offense still flows through Patrick Mahomes. So I think there's other flex people, especially if Pacheco obviously does not end up playing. I think that kind of changes things, but it just scares me. I feel like there's just as much risk with him as a flex player versus some other flex players that have a higher ceiling or a safer floor rather. So,
well, that's the thing that I'm coming at this from a matchup perspective. I'll almost never suggest playing Pacheco unless the matchup really calls for it. But when you're looking at two guys, especially in your flex position, where you can be looking at wide receivers, or you could even look at tight ends if it's bad enough, right? You're looking at all these different things. The matchup is the key component. Okay, what is the game script likely to be? Who is likely to get the most touches? And I think in this particular case, assuming Pacheco's healthy, he's going to be right up there with anyone else that you have to struggle between.
Fair. I don't hate it. I probably would stray away from it, but I very much on purpose did not get any shares of him, so I don't have to worry about that. But Scotty, hear me out, buddy. Hear me out, okay?
All right, I'm listening.
You start Zay Flowers this week versus the Colts.
Yeah.
You start Zay Flowers in the flex position. So Zay Flowers, he saw a significant decline this last week. It was somewhat unfortunate for everybody who rostered him and then played him in week one. In week one, he saw, I don't have the numbers in front of me. It was a 45% target share in week one, I believe was the number. And then in week two, it was 15%. So there's a couple different reasons for that. Obviously, OBJ went out. So that could potentially be the reason, because now he is getting coverage from the best D-back on any team. And then Mark Andrews also came back. So I do expect Mark Andrews to do well, of course, because I do believe he is Lamar Jackson's number one go-to guy, kind of like Mahomes and Kelsey. But the Colts have a terrible secondary. They're allowing 287 passing yards per game. I think this is a really good game for the Ravens, who like to run the ball, but they have a new offensive coordinator. And I think this is going to be a good opportunity for Lamar Jackson to be able to, I don't want to say practice because that's not the right word, but to be able to get better at making reads and throwing the ball. And I think it's a good opportunity for them on this defense. So I'm starting Zay Flowers. I got him teed up in any league that I own him in. He's comfortably sitting in my flex.
Yeah, I'm sort of in the position after week one, and just given the makeup of this offense, that unless the matchup is really bad, I'm going to be comfortable starting Zay Flowers, because I think the upside is just through the roof. I think, regardless of whether or not OBJ is on the field, I think Zay Flowers is the best receiver on the field. So I just think each and every week the upside is going to be there for him to have an explosive game. So definitely not worried about it this week, but even going forward, I'm going to be willing to roll the dice with Zay Flowers.
Okay. You got anything else? Any conversation for this Hear Me Out?
Yeah, bro. Hear me out. You guys should probably consider sitting DeAndre Swift. I know he's coming off the game of his career, 175 yards on 28 carries. But this week, the Eagles are playing the Buccaneers. And the Buccaneers haven't been good at a lot, but they are very good at stopping the run. They're a top 10 run defense over the first 2 weeks, continuing their domination on the ground from last year. So the other component to this is Jalen Hurts has looked pretty bad over the first 2 weeks. And as a result, the wide receivers, A.J. Brown in particular, have been very frustrated with their role in this offense. This is a get right week for the Eagles. They're going to look to sling the ball and show that they still have it. And so I just think the running back room here is going to be neglected in this game, and rightly so, because in all likelihood, they're not going to be as efficient as they typically would be on the ground. And on top of that, we all know DeAndre Swift's injury history. He had a big game last week, but you just can't expect that usage to continue. If Kenny Gainwell is not in this game, I would expect Rashad Penny to get some touches here. And if Gainwell is in this game, we're looking at a 3-man committee that I think they're not really going to utilize all that much anyway. So I am not real comfortable with DeAndre Swift in my starting lineup this week. Depending on what you've got, you might have to play him and cross your fingers. But if you have any other options, I'm looking to substitute him out.
To further strengthen your argument, Tampa is not good when it comes to passing. In fact, they're 24th ranked. They're allowing 248 yards per game through the air. So, granted, it's 2 weeks in. I don't want to ride that entire narrative, but the Tampa Bay Bucks don't have a great secondary, and I think throwing on them is going to be something the Eagles are going to try and do. I do think DeAndre Swift earned the starting running back role based solely upon last week's performance. That's me. That's where I'm at with that entire situation. But I still tend to agree with you. I think they have a really good run defense, and I think that's going to really limit his opportunities this week. So I would also probably be looking elsewhere.
And we also have to remember just the general concerns we have with the running back for the Eagles, which is Jalen Hurts is going to get the meaningful touches on the goal line. So you sacrifice that opportunity for the running back to score on the 1 and 2 and 3 yard line because the tush push is unstoppable, and they're just going to continue doing it forever until somebody figures out what to do about it. So
that's awesome.
There's just reason after reason why I'm looking to substitute him out if possible.
No, and I understand. And Scotty, I'd like you to hear me out. I'm also sitting a running back this week that a lot of people are probably kind of having to start, and that person being Najee Harris. I think Najee is on incredibly thin ice. I really do. And, I was smart enough to let somebody else draft him this year. I didn't want any pieces of him. We were very vocal about that on the show in the preseason.
Yeah, I think we need to pat ourselves on the back for Najee. We've been talking shit on Najee for well over a year now.
Yeah. And it's showing. I mean, Jaylen Warren looks like the more explosive running back to own. He does. But in week 2, Najee saw the field 57% of the time. Warren saw it 43%. But Warren was the back to own for them for fantasy. He went 6 for 20 and on the ground, and he had 4 for 6 catches. So versus Najee went 10 for 43. And he caught 1 out of 3 balls. So the only reason that Najee, in his rookie season and when he was with Big Ben, the only reason that Najee had any sort of worth was because he was catching balls out of the backfield. And that's not happening. This offense is struggling. Najee is not somebody I would want to own. I'm not saying that Warren is going to come in this week and take the role completely from Najee. I don't think that's going to be the case, but they have a wonderful matchup this week against the Raiders, so it makes it kind of difficult for me to say sit these guys. But I think the issue that you're going to start running into is who do you trust on a weekly basis? Because I think this backfield is getting more and more muddied.
Yeah, and they're playing the Raiders this week. If there is a week for Najee to look better than he is, it's this week. I don't know that that's going to happen. I'm still not betting on it. But if there is a week, it's probably this week, which means next week at this time, you might have a great sell high opportunity, in which case I would take that. Even if Najee comes out and has the game of his career, I'm looking to sell high next week.
Yeah, and that's not a bad argument. But if you don't have to start him, I wouldn't, because I still don't know if Warren just ends up outperforming him. So, all right, that's it. I'm tired of hearing you out, Scotty. I'm tired of listening to you. But God dang it, if you don't look good, you got that flex appeal, baby. So in this segment, we're going to go back and forth. We're just going to bring a couple. This is not going to be anything crazy. This is not going to be anything, we're not going to get too stat heavy on it. But we're bringing 2 guys to the table to go head to head, pit them against each other. If you had both these guys on your team, which one would you flex? Okay. So not looking at the rest of the team, just these 2 guys. Pretty simple. Understand the rules, Scotty.
I understand.
Okay. So I have brought to the table for you, my friend. Would you rather flex Jerry Jeudy or Jaylen Warren this week?
PPR, half PPR.
Well, we're going to assume for the sake of conversation, real men play PPR, so that's what we're going to go with.
All right. I think either way.
And women. I don't want to discriminate. Yeah. There's women fantasy football players.
I think either way, I'm going Jerry Jeudy. Mostly because in your flex position, you're looking for upside. You're looking for a guy who might be able to add a lot of value on a week-by-week basis and maybe a little bit riskier. But Jerry Jeudy's coming off this injury, man. The fact of the matter is he's the wide receiver 1 for this offense. And if he comes out healthy in week 3, I think he's going to get more targets than Courtland Sutton. I think he is going to have the best opportunity to run some or to get some points. And this Miami offense is good. So they're going to put up points. And the game script is likely going to be throw the ball all day long. So Jerry Jeudy, as we saw last week, just because he's on the field doesn't necessarily mean he's going to be a smash play, but I think he's only got up to go from week 2. And so I am someone who I do have him in a few leagues. He was on my bench last week because I didn't trust him, but this week I'm starting to throw him into those lineups, and I'm going to be okay with it. Jaylen Warren, as we talked about, they're playing the Raiders. There's an opportunity there because the Raiders are not good, but the split backfield concerns me. Honestly, their offense by itself kind of concerns me. I don't think they're going to be in scoring position all that much. So I think Jerry Jeudy's the upside play. He's the one I'm going with.
Okay. I'll also take Jerry Jeudy on that one. I think he's Jaylen Warren. I'm excited. I like him as an own. Don't get me wrong, because there is a lot of value there intrinsically. And I think that as the season progresses, there's even more of a reason to keep him around. So please don't drop him. But Jerry Jeudy, on paper, is the wide receiver 1 for the Broncos. So I'm going to take Jerry Jeudy. I would feel more comfortable flexing him this week than Jaylen Warren.
Yeah. All right. Who's got more flex appeal, Slapdog? Are you taking DJ Moore versus the Chiefs defense or Mike Williams versus the Vikings defense?
So here's the issue, because both these guys were kind of drafted in a similar position. So they're probably, they're looked at similar in a lot of ways. Mike Williams, very obviously, he's the guy that you would want to take in this situation because he's on a better team. I think I'm going to take DJ Moore here, and that might be a little crazy to say. I know it might. The reason I'm going to take DJ Moore is because I think they're going to scheme him and use him more. There, pun intended. I don't think that the Bears. I don't know. Justin Fields actually came out today and he said he wasn't blaming the coaches. I can play better. I think Fields is starting to realize that if he doesn't get this figured out very quickly, he's not going to have a job in the NFL. I'm not riding that, but the issue for me is the Vikings defense, and the Chargers and the Vikings play this week. The Vikings defense is really good, and there's a lot more weapons. The Chiefs defense, Scotty, you're a Chiefs fan, they're not as good, plain and simple. So I think I'm gonna throw my dart at DJ Moore this week, and I'm gonna hope that he ends up getting schemed in and used a little bit more for this Bears offense, like they need to do for him, or he needs to do for them rather.
Yeah, I'm going to vehemently disagree here. I understand the argument, though, because DJ Moore, I agree. He's the best weapon on this Bears team, and they want to get him the ball. So I think they're going to do whatever they can to draw up plays to get the ball in his hand. So I get that. There is some upside there. First of all, I don't think the Chiefs defense is worse than the Vikings defense. I think by the end of the season, it's not even going to be close. Obviously, the Chiefs offensively and defensively have struggled through the first 2 weeks, so I could be totally wrong about that. But the Vikings defense is bad, and they are going to give up a lot, especially at passing yards, because oftentimes that's the way the game script's going to go. If Kirko Chains is playing like an MVP for whatever reason, like he is, they're going to put up a lot of points. So I'm going with Mike Williams because the big knock on Mike Williams is his injury history. I don't expect him to finish the season, but when he's healthy, I like him on this team. Justin Herbert is a much better passer than Justin Fields. I'm going to take that all day long. This is an offense that throws the ball way more than the Bears. And just as a side note, not really related to this particular topic, but Justin Fields, yes, he could play better, but he is also a little bit being screwed by the coaches. That's just what's happening.
He's trying to say that it's him and not his coaches, which is
that's what he has to say. that's what he should say, because what's his other option? But Justin Fields, I mean, this is a guy, he is one of the most talented rushing quarterbacks in the league. And the Bears came out and said, hey, we're going to make sure he develops as a passer. And what they really meant by that is we're going to completely eliminate designed runs from our offense for no reason. That doesn't make any sense. I understand wanting to get him to throw the ball more, but your strength on your offense is Justin Fields' legs. So you have to be able to incorporate that. And through the first 2 weeks, they didn't do that at all. So Justin Fields is being trusted with, sitting in the pocket as opposed to designing runs for him. So he is being screwed a little bit, and that limits the overall efficacy of the offense. Like they're not able to move the ball because they're forcing their quarterback to do something that doesn't make sense. And we saw this at the beginning of last season too. And eventually they just threw their hands in the air and said, F it, we're going to let him do his thing. And then he became awesome to watch, better for the organization, better for fantasy football. It's only a matter of time before that happens again. But in this particular case, I'm taking Mike Williams all day long over DJ Moore.
Okay, we'll see. We'll see what happens. It's going to, obviously you don't have both those guys in your starting lineups, or even probably rostered, so it's not going to be an issue for you, but it was just a fun one that I wanted to have a conversation about.
Yeah. So what about this one? Who's got more flex appeal? Jaden Reed versus the Saints defense, or Treylon Burks versus the Cleveland defense?
Now, this is one where you probably actually could make a valid argument that you might need to flex one of these two guys. So Jaden Reed, he's 28% rostered. He's sitting there doing nothing. He's on the waiver wire. And he's the guy that I'm going to take in this situation here, because Treylon Burks to me is scary. I mean, and it's not necessarily just for him, but a lot of it just has to do with that Titans offense in general. Ryan Tannehill has not looked great. They're not really throwing the ball to Treylon Burks. He's not the wide receiver one option, which is fine. Neither is Jaden Reed, Jaden Reed. I better get his name right. But the Packers are still throwing the ball more. I mean, Burks, you look at Burks' numbers, he's had 7 targets on the year in less than 100 yards. He had 76 yards last week and less than 20 in week 1. And the only reason he had 76 yards is because he caught a deep ball. So he is not A.J. Brown. I was thinking about this today. I'm like, man, they really traded A.J. Brown for this kid. And he has not panned out at all like what I think that the Titans hoped that they would. Jaden Reed, I actually really like. He saw 5 targets in week 1. He saw 8 last week, and I don't have the numbers in front of me. He's seeing 56% of the snap counts, which is fine. Not great. But if I had to choose one, I'm going to take Jordan Love and Jaden Reed on this. He got 2 touchdowns last week. He's a rookie, and I think that as the season progresses, he could continue to be more and more involved in this offense.
Yeah, I think until Watson's back in the starting lineup, Jaden Reed is all day long. His snap share is good enough for flex, and his target percentage is good enough for flex. And Jordan Love is playing out of his damn mind. He's looking like he's revitalized this Packers offense. So yeah, I agree with you 100%. You're not going to get me to fight you on this one.
Okay, fair enough. Let's move over to one that I think is very difficult, my friend. This one being Jahmyr Gibbs versus Atlanta or Breece Hall versus the Patriots.
Yeah. I think Breece Hall could make me eat my words on this one because Breece Hall is the better back. He has the higher ceiling if he is getting the snap share and the opportunity. But as we saw last week against the Cowboys, they didn't want to give him the ball yet. And it's understandable, honestly. Obviously Breece Hall wasn't happy about it, but it's understandable because without Aaron Rodgers, their entire passing attack is in shambles. Breece Hall is the way that they're going to move the ball throughout the season, and they want to make sure he's healthy. And they didn't want to play him against the dominant Dallas Cowboys defense. Now, here's the thing. The Patriots aren't the Cowboys, but they are not a slouch. The Patriots have a very good defense. It's difficult to move the ball against that defense. Jahmyr Gibbs, he's probably going to own the backfield. Well, to the degree that Dan Campbell will allow that to happen. He's going to get more of a share than he did in the first 2 weeks. And he is a very explosive back. He can make plays. The problem with Jahmyr Gibbs is it seems like no matter how many snaps he's on the field for, he might not get any red zone touches. And that is very scary. But if anyone's going to make those explosive plays, through the passing attack or whatever, Jahmyr Gibbs is capable of doing that. And I think until we see Breece Hall get his snap share up consistently, I think I'm going to go with Jahmyr Gibbs, and that's only compounded by Montgomery probably being absent this week.
Yeah, he did not practice today. He's got a thigh injury. So this one, it painstakingly, I'm stuck between a rock and a hard place here because this is like flip a coin for me almost. I don't even like this. This is why I wanted you to read this one. So you took Gibbs. You know what? I'm just going to go with Gibbs as well because the problem, like you mentioned, is Breece Hall's ability to be on the field right now. I think that changes. I really do. And that's why I'm really struggling here. I think that, he's kind of spoke up about how frustrated he was. He only got 4 touches last week. But on the flip side of this, the Jets told everyone, him included, hey, you're going to be on a limited snap count until we feel that you're comfortable enough to go 100%. So I get both sides. I think he, I like the fact that he was upset though, because he's a competitive guy that shows that he wants to be out there. It shows that he feels he should be out there. And I think that throughout the season, he's going to, I think even this week, as early as this week, we could see a different Breece Hall and he could be on the field a heck of a lot more than 4 touches. But I think Breece Hall has a higher floor, but Jahmyr Gibbs has a safer, or I think Breece Hall has a higher ceiling, but Gibbs has a safer floor. So I'll take Gibbs as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's the right move. It's going to be tough. I have Breece Hall in 3 leagues, I think, and it's just been a struggle. I think I've kept him in my starting lineup both weeks just because the upside is there. He could get 5 touches and still have 80 yards and a touchdown, as we saw in week 1. He's capable of doing that. But this is 2 tough matchups in a row. I think there's a chance that he might not see the snap share again this week. Who's got more flex appeal?
Who's
Zach
got
Moss,
more flex?
Zach Moss versus the Ravens or DeAndre Swift versus Tampa Bay? This is gross.
It's pretty gross. Yeah, no, the Ravens have a pretty good front. Both these teams are very good at stopping the run. I'm going to take Zach Moss on this one because, which is a culture shock, right? You look at what DeAndre Swift did last week. It should be, I think most people are going to sit there and say, why are you not picking DeAndre Swift? I think Zach Moss, with the absence of John Taylor, Anthony Richardson is still kind of in that. I think he's in concussion protocol, so he's probably not going to play this week. And even if he does, I think they're going to try and play it a little bit safer. I don't like either of these guys because they're going up against very tough defenses, but I'm going to take Zach Moss on this.
Yeah, I agree with you. Even though it's gross, I think it's pretty easy. I just, as I mentioned about DeAndre Swift already, it wouldn't surprise me if he got a minority of the carries this game against a very difficult run defense. So I'm fading DeAndre Swift. I'll take Zach Moss. I will say, I've been seeing rumblings now that it seems like people are more and more optimistic that JT is just going to show up and come right back into this lineup here in a couple weeks.
Yeah, I don't know. I would figure he would just want to get traded and be done with it, but also obviously it doesn't make sense financially for him. So I think there is a real situation. Like, you think John Taylor's just watching this games at home and he's like, damn, this actually could be a decent team. Maybe I should want to stick around.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Zach Moss is slowly becoming more and more of a sell high for me as well, because obviously we saw him perform well. I think it's going to be tough because even if he gets, even if he has a good game, his ceiling's going to be limited going against this Ravens defense, which is always good and has been good. So it'll be interesting to see. But I think in this particular case, Zach Moss takes the cake for me. I just don't see DeAndre Swift having a good game.
Okay. Last flex appeal, Scotty. Alexander Mattison against the Chargers or George Pickens against the Raiders?
Gross.
It is gross. Yeah, no, this is gross. It's not fun.
Yeah, no. The thing about these two games is that I think both of these guys are going to find that the game script is against them, because I do think that the Steelers are going to be able to move the ball on the ground. They're not going to have to throw that much. And we all know George Pickens is great at circus catches, not great at drawing targets. And there's a correlation there too that I don't think people put together. The reason he's in a position to make circus catches is because he can't get separation. Right? You have to just throw the ball up to him and he's got to do something insane to get the catch. And George Pickens has proven through the first 2 weeks that he's just doesn't draw targets, for whatever reason. Alexander Mattison on the flip side obviously has new competition in his backfield, but I don't really expect that to be an issue necessarily this week. But I think he's going to be written out of this game script because these are two high-powered offenses against two bad pass defenses. So I think there's going to be a lot of passing yards to go around. I think I'm going to have to go with Alexander Mattison just on the off chance he gets some red zone work and maybe finds his way into the end zone. But I wouldn't be excited about either of these guys this week.
No, I wouldn't either. I think Alexander Madison's the guy for me as well. I don't think Cam Akers is going to be ready to go this week, so he might suit up and get 1 or 2 touches, but that could change as early as next week. Right now, just given the turnaround, it's got to be Madison for me for everything that you just stated. So, all right, that's it. That's all for Flex Appeal. God dang it, Scotty, you're looking good, but it's time to get over to our Brainbusters, all those questions that all of our viewers and listeners have sent over to us, and let's do it.
Here's the mail, it never fails. It makes me wanna wag my tail. When it comes, I wanna wail. Mail.
Was I on that?
Beautiful.
Was it perfect? Okay, that's great. No, I'm so happy to hear that. First question comes from Kitties88.
We need to call the police on that guy?
We might. But he has a question. He says, thoughts on Miles Sanders and Njoku for Joe Mixon, assuming a trade, we'll say redraft for the sake of conversation. Man, I don't think so. I think I'd take Miles Sanders and Njoku.
I don't know. The Browns look bad, and Njoku is, I've been high on Njoku since the beginning of time, but he just hasn't really got this opportunity, and now this offense is underperforming. The scoring opportunities aren't really going to be there. There's new wide receiver competition, obviously, there. Makes it harder for him to secure targets. Miles Sanders, we know he's going to get, 10 to 15 carries a game, but again, on a bad offense. Joe Mixon.
Oh, never mind. Sorry, go ahead. I thought you were, for whatever reason, I thought you said Joe Mixon was on a bad offense. I was like, wait.
No. Well, I mean, for the first 2 weeks, that offense is bad, but I don't expect that offense to stay bad. And Joe Mixon is consistent. I mean, he's consistently a top 10 running back. He's going to, assuming this offense figures out how to play football again, he's going to see red zone work. And he's a bell cow, especially without P. Ryan in the picture. So I think in a vacuum, I'd rather have Mixon than Sanders and Njoku.
All right, you talked me into it. So do this trade, take Mixon, and then go get Zach Ertz off of the waiver wire. That's my advice to you, Kitties88. Next question comes.
Don't play him this week.
Next question from Squishy Ducky. He says, should he trade Jahmyr Gibbs for Puka Nacua if you lost Chubb? So should he? I'll let you answer this and maybe explain some of the depth here.
Yeah, the question is, should he trade Puka Nacua for Gibbs if he lost Chubb? And I think, we talked about this a little bit behind the scenes because I think this type of trade, especially, specifically with Puka Nacua, is going to be real common now with the loss of Nick Chubb. Now you acquired this guy that nobody expected to be great. He's like the wide receiver 2 on the year for some reason because he's got 1 billion targets in 2 weeks. Do you trade him because you acquired him for nothing? Do you trade him and get somebody to fill in that empty running back slot? And I think the answer is yes. Gibbs, it's hard for me to trust Gibbs in the situation that he's in. But the fact of the matter is he's talented. He's someone that's going to see carries. He's going to see targets out of the backfield. So he's got a lot of upside on a week-by-week basis. And obviously Puka Nacua is crazy, but without Nick Chubb, if you had Nick Chubb, that means you drafted him in the 1st or 2nd round. And that's a big piece of your team that is now gone for the season. So I think it's drastic times call for drastic measures, and I would do that. Now, I wouldn't trade Puka Nacua for Gibbs if you have 2 good running backs, but if you're in the situation where you lost Nick Chubb, you got to start making money moves and make something happen.
I think it's kind of a fair, I realistically, I think this is somewhat of a fair trade. I think maybe the Nacua wins by just a little bit based solely on current production, but you're really basing it off of, is Gibbs going to start producing without Montgomery, and is Nacua going to start declining with Cooper Kupp coming back? So I think this is mostly fair. I like Puka Nacua just a little bit more because we're currently seeing that production, but it could fall off pretty quick. So, hope that helps you, Squishy. JWW Walter 1 asks, when is it time to give up on the underperforming backs and receivers? I think you have to look yourself in the mirror in the morning, my friend. I think you have to wake up. JW Walter 1. You get up, you go look in the mirror, you start brushing your teeth tomorrow morning, and you say, maybe today is the day. I think that's what you have to do, because we're in week 2. We're not going to hit the panic button, but we really need to start. This is where you try and mold a team. This is where these first, I think the first 4 weeks of the NFL for fantasy football purposes are incredibly important, because this is where you're going to make or break your team. You can still sell guys for relatively the same value. You can still move guys around. You can still do things. So you have to kind of look at a couple different things. You have to look at, how are they currently performing? What is their season-long output? Are they still getting the same target share? X, Y, and Z. There's so many different things you have to think about, but I think you have to start thinking about it now. I'm not going to say give up on anybody, but I think you need to start making some money moves now, my friend, before it becomes too late.
Yeah. So, I mean, the answer, obviously this is a very broad question, but the answer, number 1, is you give up on them when there's a better option on waivers that you can get.
Yes.
If you're able to make a 1-for-1 swap, or even move one guy to your bench and drop somebody you're never going to use and pick up somebody who's performing, you do that right away. But the other thing is, you just kind of keep a mental note, especially this early in the season. Okay, this guy's not doing what I thought he would do. You keep an eye on him and you wait for him to have a boom week, and then you decide, okay, is now the time to trade him, because you want to make sure you're getting value for your trade. You don't want to sell somebody who's underperforming at under their cost and then find out later that they're actually decent and just had a rough start. So you wait for the boom week, and then you decide, okay, is it worth it to make a swap? Maybe you throw some feelers out there. Don't send trade requests, but you just start conversations and just see what the potential value could be after a boom week, and you go from there. So right now is the time where you start making mental notes. You keep a close eye on the waiver wire, and you see if after a big week, it's worth the trade.
And I think a good example of this is if we look at Austin Eckler last year. The first 4 weeks of Austin Eckler, he was not a performer. And there was a lot of people who were really, really concerned about it. And then by the end of the year, you're like, oh, why were we even panicking about Austin Eckler? The same could probably be said for Jamar Chase right now, this year. So I'm not hitting the panic button on Jamar Chase. Does it suck having him in my lineup every single week right now when he's not performing? Absolutely. It's terrible. But you can't bench Jamar Chase. You can't just move on from Jamar Chase. And I'm not going to sell Jamar Chase for what I value as anything less. Now, if I lose my fantasy season because of that, because Jamar Chase ends up being a bust, that's on me. And I'm okay willing to die on that hill. But I'm not going to sell him for pennies on the dollar because I still think intrinsically he has value. So there's two sides of this coin. Look yourself in the mirror in the morning, brush your teeth, stare at yourself and say, is it time to move on this person? I don't know if there's any better advice we could give. Next question comes from Fantasy Compadre. Yeehaw, brother. In a full PPR plus a half a point for first downs, should he trade this trade, Scotty? Jalen Waddle or Breece Hall and George Pickens?
I'm taking the Waddle side all day long.
Yeah.
Jalen Waddle has, if Tua can stay healthy, he's got top 5 upside.
Yep.
You know, I think we mentioned it before, but last season with Tua in and out of play, he still finished as a top 10 wide receiver. He's a PPR machine. You know, this is an offense that likes to throw the ball. They like their speedsters. He's got weekly upside to be the wide receiver 1. He's as valuable as it gets for me. I put him in the same tier as those elite wide receivers that you drafted in the first round. You know, I've always been high on Waddle, and I'm going to continue to be high on Waddle. Obviously, I like Breece Hall, but without Aaron Rodgers, this offense takes a big hit. They're going to be in scoring position way less often, and we all know how I feel about Pickens. He's got to get a lot more targets before I'm concerned about him at all.
Agreed. I'll take Waddle in that one and run with it. Next question comes from William 76795843. Guys, we gotta work on your Twitter handles. I swear. He asks, should I start Calvin Ridley versus Houston or Chris Olave versus Jair Alexander? And also possible rain. I'm gonna go. It's got to be Calvin Ridley, right? I think.
Yeah.
Question mark?
I think Calvin Ridley's the upside play for sure. And, you know, we saw what he could do in week 1. You know, in week 2, when they played the Chiefs, they just weren't able to put things together. And one thing that you have to keep in mind is this offense, I think they undervalued in week 2 the impact of Travis Etienne. They didn't really use him that much in week 2, and they didn't establish that ground game, and it allowed the Chiefs defense to kind of sit back and let Chris Jones do whatever he wanted to do on the front. I think they're going to learn from that mistake. I think it's going to be a more well-rounded offense going forward, and I think Calvin Ridley is really going to benefit. I expect this offense to be, you know, very high powered. By the end of the season, I expect this offense to be very efficient, and I think Calvin Ridley is going to be a big part of that. We had a lot of concerns in the preseason about, okay, how's he going to look? Is he going to be rusty? And week 1, he just completely demolished all those criticisms. Calvin Ridley is a great wide receiver. He is going to be the star of this team. Once they score more than 9 points in a game, Calvin Ridley is going to be a big part of it. So I'm going him.
Yeah, I like Chris Olave too. Don't get me wrong, but I think the problem is I think the Jaguars get up on Houston, but I'm going to take Ridley on that one as well. Next question comes from Alpha Macho. That's a cool name. And he asks us, are we hiring? I'm going to tell you, we're not hiring to pay anybody because we're not getting paid to do this at the moment. But I will say we're always looking for talent. So we're not just going to bring anybody in off the street, but we are always welcoming anybody who is very passionate about fantasy football and could bring some skills to the table to help us do some things, because we have quite a bit that we are trying to bring to all of our fans. So next question comes from over on YouTube. RRQ says, who should I start this week? Waller versus San Francisco or Henry versus New Jersey? The Patriots got their starting O-line back. Giants don't have Saquon Barkley. Scotty, as our resident Hunter Henry fan, what are you going to do, buddy?
I don't like that box you're putting me in. This is a tough one. You know, the Giants are going to get smoked by San Francisco. So they're going to have to throw the ball. The question is, are they going to be effective with doing that? We saw them in week 1 go up against a good defense, and every single person, Darren Waller included, was totally useless. and that is that's a scary proposition. On the flip side, I think Hunter Henry, like I said, is going to be a bright spot for fantasy in a defensive matchup, but you still have to temper your expectations. I mean, it's Hunter Henry we're talking about. We're not talking about Travis Kelce. So, at the end of the day, I think you have to look at this is kind of a situation where you got to look at your matchup. I think the upside goes with Darren Waller. I think ultimately I'd probably go with Darren Waller. He is the number one target on that team. If anything happens offensively, especially without Saquon Barkley, it's going to be through Darren Waller. So I think he's the upside play. I think he's the one I'd go with this time.
Yeah, I'm going to take Waller on that one as well. Somebody's got to catch the ball. Next question. Squishy Ducky, welcome back. Appreciate it. Is there big expectations from Hollywood Brown? With 15 targets in the first 2 weeks, there's no timeline on Kyler Murray coming back. I'm going to say no.
Big expectations is
that's controversial. Yeah, no, that's very broad. I'm going to say this. Hollywood is what he is. He's playing on a shitty team with no quarterback. So if you need a flex start, I don't hate it. I just don't. And the Cardinals are going to be playing down a lot. I don't think Joshua Dobbs is great. I don't really have more to offer you, unfortunately. I just don't think I'm checked out as a Cardinals fan. So that's probably not fair to answer this question.
Well, I'll tell you that the Cardinals, still may be the worst team in the league, but they look a lot friskier than what a lot of people expected. I kind of went into the season not expecting any Cardinal players, maybe outside of James Conner, to be useful for fantasy. And I think through the first 2 weeks, they've shown, okay, there are some glimmers of hope. If you're in a bind and you need to start Hollywood Brown, I think you could do that. So I'm not necessarily afraid of starting Hollywood Brown. He's probably, outside of James Conner, the number one person I would start on this offense, maybe the only other person. But I'm not real excited about it. You have to temper your expectations.
I think Zach Ertz is great.
Yeah.
He does have one more question. He says, start Puka Nacua against the Bengals or Zay Flowers against the Colts. Give me Puka Nacua this week.
Yeah, I think those are both good options. But I think until Puka Nacua stops getting 20 targets a game, you pretty much got to leave him in your lineup.
Yeah. Next question comes from You're a Bum. Thank you. Appreciate it. He asks, Algier for Kittle. Man, that is interesting to me. I'm going to say I do it. I take Algier. I would trade away Kittle.
Yeah, I think, yeah. If that's the question, then yes, I agree. I'm taking the Algier side all day long. I think Kittle, especially from a fantasy perspective, is one of the most overrated tight ends in the league. I mean, he's very spotty. There are a ton of weapons on this offense.
He needs a haircut.
Yeah, he also looks like he might cook meth in a trailer. Like, he seems like a cool guy, but from a fantasy perspective, he's real boom and bust. It's tough to rely on him. Whereas Algier is getting a consistent workload. He's getting a lot of the goal line work. He's getting a lot of the red zone work. I'd rather have Bijan, but Algier is a very nice consolation prize that I'm happy starting.
I am as well, and you trade away Kittle and you go get Zach Ertz. Problem solved. Next question comes from Vincent Rodriguez. What up, V-Rob? Appreciate the question, brother. He asks, trade away Garrett Wilson for Jonathan Taylor. I like this. I like this quite a bit, and I'm going to say I think I would trade away Garrett Wilson for Jonathan Taylor.
I think I would too. Yeah. I think we're at that point where we're all a little bit more optimistic that Taylor is going to come on back, and Garrett Wilson is at the very most someone who can get you one touchdown a game and 40 yards receiving, unless he has a ridiculous play where he breaks 10 tackles, because that offense is just not something you can trust. And if Jonathan Taylor's on the field, he's a league winner. So I think I would do it too.
Yeah, if you could, I would do that. I would do that in a heartbeat. There's a lot of questions coming in here, Scotty, and half of them aren't questions, but just check out my teams. And I love that, but I don't think anybody wants to listen to me read off your team. I'm sorry. Next question comes from Bronson Howe, and I'm sorry if I pronounce that incorrectly. He asks, trade AJ Brown for Devontae Adams. I'm going to say I would trade to acquire AJ Brown. So if you're trading away Devontae Adams, I like the AJ Brown side of this more.
I agree. I think better days to come for AJ Brown. Devontae Adams is a bright spot in a very bad offense, and not interested. I didn't draft Devontae Adams for that reason. I think AJ Brown is the safer bet.
Yeah, I agree. Xavier Delgado, I appreciate the question, but that question has come into like 3 separate chats about setting your lineup. Go find us over at Twitter, hit us with a DM, and I'll help you there. But I can't read all of this because it's just a lot, so I'm sorry. Last question comes from TS. What up, baby? Kelly, Pierce, Edwards, or Gainwell in full PPR? That being Joshua Kelly, Damian Pierce, Gussie Edwards, or Kenny G. Who you take? I know who I'm taking.
I'm pulling up some matchups here just so I can make sure to cross my T's and dot my I's. You go ahead.
No, that's fine. I really don't know all the matchups, which is horrible because I feel like I should. I'm going to take Joshua Kelly. I'm going to roll with him. I know that he wasn't great last week against Tennessee, but the Vikings prototypically have a shootout every single time. It's happened the last 2 games. They did it a lot last year, and I think that there's a really good chance that it's going to happen again. Joshua Kelly's going to be on the field a lot. Now, I say all this with an asterisk. If Austin Eckler is playing this week, well, even then, Kelly saw a lot of usage. I'm going to take Kelly. I don't like Gus Edwards. He's in a timeshare. Kenny G is almost non-existent at this point because I really do believe that it's DeAndre Swift's backfield. And then you have Damian Pierce, who hasn't looked good this year. He's not on a good team. That team is going to struggle, and they're going to forget how to run the ball. He saw 15 attempts last week for 31 yards against the Colts defense. And he was on the field for 45% of the time. Give me Joshua Kelly.
Yeah, how many touches did Kelly see? It's got to be comparable.
Last week, 13 for 39, which also wasn't great, but he was on the field 79% of the time, and that was without Eckler. So they're neither of them are wonderful, but I think the Chargers offense is in a much better position, and Kelly, I think, is just in a much better position right now than Damian Pierce is from an offensive standpoint.
Yeah, I think if Eckler's out this week, I think Kelly for sure. If Eckler is in, I would maybe consider throwing Edwards or Pearson.
Shit. He said I own Eckler. So he's talking if Eckler doesn't play.
Oh, okay.
Bad,
if Eckler doesn't play, then I think I would throw Kelly in there just because the opportunity and the meaningful touches are probably going to be high, assuming that this is a high scoring affair. So I think I would agree with you there. Justice Hill is dealing with some injury stuff, so Gus Edwards might see more of a workload here. But again, this is an offense that wants to throw the ball more. They've got a rushing quarterback who's going to, run the ball with his feet. So I don't hate that play either. But if Austin Eckler's out, I think Kelly might be the one that I go with as well.
Yeah, I'm going to do that. And that's it, Scotty. That's all of the questions. Oh, this one popped up. Are we hiring again? We already told you guys we love you. We were looking for talent, but we have no money. We're all poor. That's it, my friend. That is all that we have this week. For anybody who is watching us on any platform, do really appreciate it. And I'm going to tell you, this was an awesome episode. I enjoyed all the questions. We do this every Wednesday. We have questions. So we are live twice a week for anybody who's our first time peeking in on us. We do this twice a week, Mondays and Wednesdays. We go live, and then our podcast released on Tuesdays and Thursdays, very early in the morning before you even wake up. So if you miss anything, we're there for you. And we do appreciate these questions. Let's keep them coming. Hit the subscribe button wherever you're at. It truly does mean the world, and this was fun. But this is all the time that we have. So we
are
out.
If you enjoyed this episode, make sure you tune into our new releases every week on your favorite podcast app. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, and check out leatherbrains.com for all of your fantasy football needs. And remember, Brainiacs, a championship should be more than a fantasy.